Hey, everybody, and welcome to Adapter Parish episode 115 Rear Window. We're excited to be getting back to Hitchcock, but before we pick up our binoculars, let's talk about our next episode. Now, since this show started, we've always known that we didn't want to limit ourselves. Books, movies, TV shows, those are all easy for us to look at. Musicals are a little more challenging, but we make it happen. We haven't looked at video games as much as we've wanted to, but we have done it. But there is one area we've always wanted to explore, and that's board games and their adaptations. And there's one board game we've always known would be the first to make it on the show, and that's Clue, or Cluedo, depending on which side of the pond you're on. In episode 116, we're taking a look at the classic game of Who Done It with What and Where, and of course, we'll be discussing 1985's Clue the movie, written and directed by Jonathan Lynn. But we didn't want to stop there, so there's a few other stage and small screen adaptations that are going to be making their way into that episode. That'll be out in 2 weeks on Tuesday, May 10th. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections about today's episode or any others that you'd like to hear on the show, remember to email adapterparishcast@gmail.com. If you enjoy the show, we'd love it if you would share that with the world by leaving a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. We're also on Patreon at patreon.com/adaptcast. We've got a patron-only community and our bi-weekly bonus show, Adapter Parish Plus, with episodes releasing every Tuesday between episodes of this show. We hope you check it out. Show notes from this and all other episodes can be found at adapterparishcast.com. And with that, on with the show, Adapter Parish, episode 115, Rear Window. Hello and welcome to Adapter Parish, a podcast about adaptation. I'm Jeremy Latour.
I'm Ari Lipshaw, and today we will be talking about the 1954 classic Hitchcock thriller, Rear Window.
We're back to Hitchcock.
Woo!
Hey, I just want to thank you for letting me add this to our schedule.
Yeah.
This is kind of a late edition.
Well, it's a tie-in.
Yeah.
It's our first tie-in with another podcast that you also do.
It's my other show.
Is it nepotism? What is it? Cross-promotion?
I mean, I think there's probably some degree of narcissism involved in this.
Yep. So explain.
Is it narcissism if I recognize that it's narcissism?
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's fair.
It still is. Yeah.
My ability to recognize my narcissism is probably my favorite thing about myself.
There you go. So explain. What is this crossover?
All right, well, I have another show called Multiplex Time Machine that I host with my best friend Ian. The entire idea behind that show was, 2007 was a great year for movies, and I stand behind that.
I just want to point out that Jeremy literally was in a store the other day, just struck up a conversation.
Let me tell this story.
Yeah.
So I'm in a little corner store around from us. There's these two guys behind that I go to all the time, and these two guys behind the register. And they're talking, and one of them said something about No Country for Old Men, which is a good movie. And the other one said, yeah, it's great. And he said, well, I haven't seen it. You haven't seen No Country for Old Men? And I came up to the register at that point, and it was an easy way for me to jump into the conversation.
They were speaking as men do,
right,
about movies from their youth.
And I said, yeah, No Country, it's really good. I said, yeah, it's really good. I said, yeah, 15 years this year, isn't it? And they're like, yeah. And the guy who had seen it said, man, 2007 was a great year for movies. That actually happened to me. It actually happened to me.
Like, if you wrote that in a script, no one would believe it. They would be like, that's no.
And I said, this won't be surprising that I, a white man in my 30s, have a podcast, but I'm going to tell you about it. It's literally all about the movies of 2007.
Oh, my God.
And everyone was amazed, and everyone applauded and carried me out on their shoulders. And when I say that, what I mean was he said, oh, that sounds interesting.
I'll check it out.
I
think he said, yeah.
And I knew that there's a 10% chance that he would, but that's totally fine. All of this to say, I have another show called Multiplex Time Machine that is all about the movies of 2007, and we just had an episode come out about a week and a half ago on the Shia LaBeouf movie Disturbia. I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, but it's kind of a loose adaptation of Rear Window. There was actually a court case about whether it was directly based on it or not, and they made the case it was not directly based on it, and I believe, I can't remember how it shook out, but they were saying it wasn't. It is loosely based on it, and I thought I cannot go into this show in good conscience and talk about it as a potential adaptation of Rear Window without having rewatched Rear Window and the Christopher Reeve remake.
Yep.
And so I thought, well, if I'm going to watch those anyway, hey, sweetie,
Yeah.
can we just do Rear Window on the show?
And I said, fine.
Because it would be quick.
It would be quick, which it was. Although, in full disclosure, we did sit down to record last night and went, shit, there was a short story we forgot to read. So we had to postpone one night so we could read the 2 short stories that we're going to talk about momentarily.
So anyway, when we get to the end of the episode, I'm going to talk about Disturbia a little bit. But I will say I'm not going to go on at length about it because I have a whole other show. You can hear me and my buddy Ian talk about it. So if you really want the full experience for this, you're going to have to listen to both. And if you're sitting there going, well, I don't know if I want the full experience, I'm going to look at you and I'm going to say, yeah, that's fine.
That's fine.
That's totally fine.
I myself, as of this recording, have not listened to the episode about Disturbia, so I'm coming in blind.
It's fine. It's fine. What do you think? Do you think I liked it?
Disturbia?
Yeah.
I don't know. I have no idea. You haven't said anything about it to me.
Yeah. Guess what?
What?
It's okay.
All right. Fair enough.
I'll tell you more about
it's
it
funny,
at the end.
Given the premise of the show, how many movies you have watched for that podcast that you either haven't liked or are like, eh. Very few great ones. But I guess usually the great movies don't come out in like the first half of the year.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at 52 movies over the course of the year, and we're only like 14 in, and some of them have been great so far.
Yeah.
We've got a lot to go.
Yes. I might be making a guest appearance on 1 or 2 episodes in the future, which was basically you showing me the list of movies and saying, hey, are you interested in talking about any of these? And I pointed to maybe...
You pointed to 3. I have you
2
down
or 3,
for I have you down for guest host on 3.
Yeah. So look out for that in months to come.
But I'm really excited about it because we have precedent for this because we did a long time ago. We did Dial M for Murder and the remake of Perfect Murder. By the way, I want to say this now because it amazes me. It's going to come up again in a little bit. 1998 was a weird year for remakes.
Of Hitchcock.
Of Hitchcock specifically, because 1998 saw A Perfect Murder, which was a remake of Dial M for Murder. It saw that Gus Van Sant Psycho remake, that shot-for-shot remake.
We're not going to do that.
No, we're not going to do that. And it saw the Christopher Reeve Rear Window remake.
Yeah.
Like all in the span of 98.
Yeah.
Kind of weird.
Kind of weird, but like now that you kind of mention it, all 3 of those movies have like sort of a very different character and like how they came to be.
Yeah.
Right? One was sort of a very strange passion project. One was a big Hollywood Hitchcock remake.
Yeah.
And this was a TV movie that was also sort of a passion project.
And also they're very different original movies.
Yes.
Like Dial M for Murder there's a lot of romance in it and things like that.
Yeah.
And, this one has romance.
It has some
but
romance.
It has romance, but not in the same way.
Yeah.
There's no the plot has nothing to do with the romance.
Yeah.
In Rear Window, the romance just kind of exists alongside the plot.
Which is actually kind of nice. It's a very like comfortable romance of like 2 people that are very comfortable with each other. And we'll get into it.
I mean, he's not comfortable with her because he for some reason doesn't want to be with the most beautiful woman in the world.
Yeah, I don't know. That's very confusing. We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves.
Should we do a back of the box?
Sure. Do you have a back of the box?
Nope.
Okay. Well, maybe
Can I wing it?
Sure. Yeah. Go for it.
There's a guy. He's laid up, broke his leg. He's looking out his apartment window for weeks upon weeks upon weeks, getting to know all his neighbors, one of whom he thinks murdered his wife. And he's having a heck of a time trying to convince people that it happened. That's it.
Yeah, that's it. And it's funny, I guess spoiler alert sort of for the whole episode. I'm about to give away the ending. It turns out he did murder his wife. And when it was very clear to the audience from the beginning, because we're seeing what the character sees, that he murders his wife. And I had never seen Rear Window before. And I had always been under the impression that the guy in the apartment who had been cooped up had kind of lost his mind a little bit from being cooped up, and he was seeing things, and that was the whole point of him like sort of desperately trying to convince people that he wasn't crazy and that something had happened, but he really was crazy. And you were like, no, that's Vertigo.
Yeah. I think you were conflating them.
Yeah. But maybe to take it back even further, and then once again even further
still,
this movie was definitely based on one short story, because it is credited to Cornell Woolrich, but also maybe kind of based on an even older short story by some not famous guy named H.G. Wells.
Yeah. Well, so can I say something about that?
Yes.
Here's my assumption. My guess is the H.G. Wells story had fuck all to do with the movie.
Yeah.
But it is possible that it inspired Cornell Woolrich when he was writing It Had to Be Murder, the original short story that Rear Window is based on.
Yes.
I think that's entirely plausible.
Sure. So we did read the H.G. Wells story.
Through a window.
It's quite short.
Actually inspired Dear Evan Hansen.
That's waving through a window.
They made some changes.
Totally different. And the interesting thing to me is about this one was that, like, you think of H.G. Wells as like early science fiction writer. This is not science fiction. It was more sort of like slice of life / Victorian thriller. It's just a short story about a guy that lives in London and he's been sick or injured and he's laid up, and the only thing he has to do, because he doesn't hold with like book reading or anything, is to look out the window at the river, and he likes to see the boats pass and all the things, and he basically it's like he sees a crime. Basically he sees like a manhunt for a murderer, and he is basically just sort of like glued to the window watching like someone gets killed, and like there's a lot of racism.
Oh, it's super racist.
But
I'm laughing because of how uncomfortable it made me.
Yeah, there's no two ways about it. It is uncomfortable to read because sort of part of the point is that because the people he is watching enact this sort of drama are not white, it makes it less important that some of them are being murdered. Do you know what I mean? To him? So it's just like watching, obviously there's no movies in 1894, but he may as well be saying it's just like watching a movie. And then the escaped murderer does like end up kind of trying to climb into the apartment and hide in the apartment, and he can't really do anything because he's laid up, and it's very scary for a minute, and then the guy
he gets
shot, and someone comes in and fixes the whole situation, and that's pretty much the end.
But like the idea of I am laid up, all I can do is look out this window and observe things and make assumptions about what's going on. Oh, and now I'm actually involved in the danger that is happening outside my window.
But I'm very helpless.
Right.
Yes.
Like, I can see how that would then endure over the years and come up in other stories.
Yes.
Because I don't know. Like, I don't think that's one of the 37 plots.
No, I wouldn't say so.
Like,
probably not.
It feels a little too specific.
Yeah.
Like I said, I would buy that in some way this may have inspired Cornell Woolrich's It Had to Be Murder.
Yes.
Because again, H.G. Wells, as you say, turns out kind of popular.
Yeah. Every time H.G. Wells comes up, it just makes me think of the Dear Departed Dead Authors podcast.
The Dead Authors podcast.
The Dead Authors podcast, where Paul F. Tompkins played H.G. Wells and would invite celebrities onto the show and interview them in character as H.G. Wells, with them playing other dead authors. And it's just, I mean, it still you can go listen to it.
Yeah.
It was so good. It was so good.
If it sounds familiar, it's because it came up on the show before when we were talking about Roald Dahl.
Roald Dahl.
Because Ben Schwartz was playing Roald Dahl and found out in the episode about Roald Dahl's anti-Semitism.
Top 5 moments in podcast history ever. Anyway.
It Had to Be Murder.
Yeah.
So this other short story, Cornell Woolrich, writing as William Irish in Dime Detective magazine in February 1942.
That's great.
Published this story for the first time. We read it. I guess I'll go ahead and say it. If it was inspired by H.G. Wells Through a Window, it was inspired by more than just the idea of someone who is not well and laid up and being a voyeur and seeing crimes happen outside their window. The racism comes up in a little bit too.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm just being really naive about just how much like really, really overt racism was in everything back then.
The other thing I will say about the experience of reading this is that Jeremy came in last night and he was proud of himself, and he was like, hey, I found a PDF and I formatted it for Kindle and I put it on your Kindle, so now you have it on your Kindle. And I was like, great, thank you, sweetie, I really appreciate it. And then today when I went to read it, he was like, oh, just so you know, I had a little bit of a hard time when I was formatting it. The title kind of got mixed in with some of the text in some places, so you might just see the title pop up in quotes occasionally. And so the experience of reading it was every so often, just out of nowhere, some character would appear to say, it had to be murder.
And that was how I figured out that I made the mistake. But like that's kind of a weird thing for someone to say in the middle of a sentence. I see what happens.
I think it was in there like 2 or 3 times. It was pretty funny. But I would say the plot of this was pretty similar to the movie Rear Window. He definitely didn't have the love interest. He just had Sam, his buddy Sam, played by Thelma Ritter in the movie.
Well, that's
his faithful houseman.
I'll just say there are a few things about Sam that pop up in this story that were stood out uncomfortably.
of their time, shall we say.
What was the line that hit you the most in terms of how kind of batshit it was?
I
So he doesn't have the love interest. He doesn't have Grace Kelly to
Yeah.
send over into the other
just
apartment. He
just
Sam.
has Sam, his faithful manservant, and
Mhm.
Sam like has kind of had a close call. Like he's gone over there to rifle through the guy's papers and like kind of just make him nervous. And he comes back. He's shaken up, and he says to Sam like, "Go get a drink. You're as white as you'll ever be," or something. Some
Yeah.
words to that effect. It was awful to read.
Yeah, Sam is never like explicitly described as being black, but like the
He's-
author is doing everything they can other than that to tell you.
Yeah.
But it's nice to know that when they were looking at that and adapting the movie, they thought, we're gonna fix this. We will absolutely fix this. We're not gonna have this racist stereotype in the middle of the story. How are we gonna fix it, you ask?
We're gonna cast Thelma Ritter,
Yep, we're gonna cast no people of color.
a
in
white
this-
lady.
we're just eliminating the question entirely.
The 50s, man.
Yep.
The 50s.
I mean, let's talk about the short story for a second.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. Like
It was suspenseful.
yeah, it definitely felt I could really see how a screenwriter would sit down and go, okay, now how do I turn this into a movie? Well, the first thing I'm gonna do is the murder doesn't happen on the first page.
Yeah.
We're gonna wait a little bit for the
Just
murder to
hold
happen.
off a little
I'm
bit.
gonna wait. We're gonna hold off. We're gonna have a first act. We're gonna introduce the character. It's really just him and Sam. Well, obviously, I know how we're gonna fix Sam. Do you know Thelma Ritter? She's great.
She's great. What
So,
a peach.
I'm gonna write a part for her. I'm also gonna give him a love interest,
Yeah.
and we'll get someone blonde.
Some Hitchcock blonde.
Hitch, don't worry. I'm gonna write it as blonde as I can, and that pushes everything back.
Yeah.
So I can see how they would do that because everything that's in the story is basically in the movie.
Yeah.
It's just like just the second and third act.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, the story's about 15 pages long. Like it's not particularly
Something
long.
like that.
Yeah.
But like it's okay.
It's okay. I don't think you need to read it to appreciate Rear Window. I don't even think it's the kind of thing where I'm like, it's interesting. Like if you've seen Rear Window, you know the story.
Yeah.
And there wasn't necessarily anything in it that I was like, oh, this is so interesting. Oh, I'm so glad I read this story.
There was one thing that jumped out at me that I thought was funny. In the movie, there's a whole thing where he has a friend who's a detective that he knows from the war.
Yeah.
And he calls him up. He says, hey, I think someone murdered his wife. You got to go check it out. And the guy comes over to his apartment. He's talking to him. And one of the things he says to him is, can't you just go over there? Just when he's out, just go over with a couple of your guys, go into the apartment. And the guy says to him, yeah, I can't do that. There's like a pesky thing called, doesn't he literally say like there's a pesky thing called the Constitution
Yeah.
that prevents me from doing that? I know I'm paraphrasing.
Sure.
But he basically tells him like, I can't do that. That's not legal. That doesn't stop them in the short story.
No,
In the
no.
short story, he sends his guys right into the apartment.
Yeah, and they're like, "Oh, damn, our men must have missed something." I did think about that when I was reading the short story because I was like, "Did they have a warrant? They didn't."
Nope.
Just
Nope.
charged right in.
Just just a friend's hunch.
Yeah.
That's all it was.
That's all you need.
A friend's hunch, and he wouldn't even tell him how he knows. He just said, I called my friend and I told him, I'm pretty sure this guy murdered his wife. And at no point does he say, because I have been observing him and his wife through my back window.
Yes.
He leaves it out intentionally because he doesn't want to have to answer all of the questions that will inevitably bring up.
Sure.
So, yeah, based on nothing,
Yeah.
this guy absolutely breaks into this guy's place without a warrant.
It's
And it's fine. And then it ends in a more spectacular fashion with the guy like climbing up to the top of the building after trying to kill our main character, who has faked him out by like leaning down to the side in his wheelchair and putting a bust that he has on his shoulder. So the guy comes in and shoots him, quote, in the head, but he really shoots the bust.
that old chestnut.
Right?
That was in a Sherlock Holmes story too.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a trope I'm tired of seeing. Every 2 minutes with that one.
Yeah.
And the guy like gets out the window and he climbs up the other side of the building and he gets up to the top and in like grand Western fashion gets shot while he's at the top and he just falls. Right? Like isn't it written that he falls all the way down?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and there's even like a moment where the police officer's like, "Oh, I hate to shoot him. He's gonna fall so far," and then he like
Yeah.
shoots him anyway.
Right. And it's even written in the like at the point that the guy shot him, he didn't seem to care that much
Yeah.
anymore. So it is just it's a big dumb story, but the voyeurism is
Oh, and the explanation of like
interesting.
what happened is over within about 2 seconds at the
Yeah.
end. It's not like I am going to take you through the entire crime. It's like, oh yeah, she's buried in the floor. The wife that they spotted, not his wife, the mistress affair. She's now arrested. Fine, we figured it out.
Mhm.
That's pretty much it.
I would say if you have seen Rear Window, that doesn't mean you should read the short story. If you liked Rear Window, that also doesn't mean you should read this short story. But if you love Rear Window and you haven't read it, you should read it.
Yeah, it'll take you
Yeah.
20 minutes. It's fine.
That's right.
All right.
More importantly, decade later, they make a movie out of it. 1954. Directed by Alfred Hitchcock, written by John Michael Hayes. Jimmy Stewart as L.B. Jeffries.
46 years old, real movie star,
Mm-hmm.
James Stewart.
And he is not interested at all in Lisa Fremont. Lisa Fremont, his girlfriend, played by literal Princess Grace Kelly.
25.
I mean, in his defense, they make her very homely in this movie because
for why?
She
doesn't even wear glasses.
No.
Well, she has a job. That makes any woman like
Yes.
10% more homely.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
She has a job and that makes her undateable.
But it's a very like glamorous job. She's like a fashion magazine editor. So she gets to like basically her job is like going to fancy parties wearing very expensive clothes.
And he's like a hotshot world traveling photographer, and that's how he got his leg broken because he was in the middle. It's kind of brilliant the way they establish everything in the beginning because it's all just visual storytelling and the camera's going around the apartment and we see all of these pictures from like the race, that like Formula 1 race he was shooting, and we see the wreck in the picture, and it's just all of these things telling us exactly how his leg got broken.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of great. I will say, too, I saw this movie a long time ago. I saw it years ago. And the one thing that stuck with me is the one, like, big criticism I have in it, which is still a criticism, and we'll get to in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that was the only thing I remembered. So I always kind of told myself that I didn't like this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then we watched it. And here's the thing. Rear Window is a pretty good movie.
Well, like, no higher praise. At one point, about 15 minutes from the end, I turned to you and I was like, you know how they call Hitchcock the master of suspense? And you
Yeah.
were like, yeah. And I was like, this is very suspenseful.
Yeah. This is a good movie.
Yeah.
So anyway, we find out about how he injured himself at the beginning. Thelma Ritter shows up, who plays Stella, his nurse.
Yeah, she's great.
Taking care of him.
This is 4 years after All About Eve.
Yeah.
BT Dubs.
He's just, he's not into Lisa because he travels the world. He lives.
We can never be together. Our lives are too different. You're fancy Fifth Avenue, Madison Avenue. I live downtown. I live in this shitty apartment building with these shitty people all around, and I'm watching out the window, and I can't. I don't. Is this a good Jimmy Stewart?
Sure. As good as any.
I live in an apartment building, and I can see all these people out the window, Lisa. And I just
No. You listen here, Lisa.
Your money's not in the bank. It's in John's house and Tim's house. And I did that, and you were like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "It's like one of the most famous lines in It's a Wonderful
I knew what
Life."
the line was. No, fuck you. I didn't say that. I said, "Oh, it's a Wonderful Life," right?
I don't think you did say that.
I did say that.
Okay.
I know what it's from. If we can agree on anything, it's that Lisa is undateable.
Right, because she's
the worst.
Grace Kelly wearing what she kind of swans in at one point. She's wearing this like just gown. She's like, "Oh, please excuse my like attire. I was at a fancy dinner party, having to show off this year's collection or whatever it is." And she mentions that it's an $1,100 dress, and I immediately turned to you, and you were already on your calculator, like looking up the exchange rate, the inflation rate. You were like, it's about $11,000 today. And I said, that tracks because I feel like a dress you would wear to the Oscars or probably even more than $11,000. But like a celebrity's dress, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So 25-year-old Grace Kelly in an $11,000 dress, 46-year-old Jimmy Stewart with, like I said, a real movie star's body. There's one point where he like takes his like pajama jacket off, so Thelma Ritter can give him kind of a massage, because I don't know what his broken leg has to do with needing like a massage on his back. I guess
because she's massaging his whole body.
Yeah. He's all cramped up.
Mm-hmm.
It just reminded you can take this part out, but it just reminded me when we're putting the pajamas on our toddler at night. Usually I like pull the pants like way up on his chest because it's funny. And you always say what's the movie, the 50s movie star?
Robert Mitchum.
You say he looks like Robert Mitchum because he's got this like cute toddler belly and his pants pulled all the way up, and that's kind of what kind of what it looked like.
I mean, everyone's done that, right? Like, everyone's taken, like, a pair of stretchy pants and pulled them up too high.
Yeah.
You know, for comedy.
Yeah.
We've all done that.
Sure.
That's what Jimmy Stewart looks like in this.
Yeah.
With his just saggy Jimmy Stewart body.
Yeah.
That is a perfectly normal body. And there's nothing that says that a movie star shouldn't have a body like that. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is no movie stars now do have a body like that.
No, and I guess what we're also saying is to just sort of normalize that, like, this 46-year-old man and, like, Grace Kelly, like, of course they'd be together. She's only 20 years younger than him, and she is into him.
So much.
She is like, I am going to have sex with you tonight. Is that cool with you? And he's like,
my leg's so broken.
my broken leg, Lisa. I can't. And she's like,
who are you doing now?
I don't know. I went a little southern.
You went very southern.
And she, like, it's so shocking because she, like, brought her nightgown over, and then the police officer comes over and he keeps, anyway.
There's a lot of Jimmy Stewart explaining things to her in this movie. No, what you gotta understand, what you gotta understand, Lisa, because and it's about the murder across the way, and it's about how she can never be with him, about all these different types of things. But her greatest sin is being in love with him and being super hot.
Yeah, and the thing that I, like, never understood, and we'll get to the actual plot of Rear Window in a second, but
this is the actual plot of Rear Window.
The thing that I never understood is that the case that he's making is, have you ever, like, ridden a goat? Have you ever, like, drunk whiskey out of a camel bladder? Like, have you ever slept all night in -30 with nothing but your piss to keep you warm? Like, he's
in a polar bear's butthole. Yeah. Have you ever done that, Lisa? Have you ever done that?
Well, that's what you have to do if you're with me. And I turned to you and I was like, but that's his job.
Yeah.
That's not his, like, life. Why would she go with him on his work trips? I don't understand. Like, he has an apartment that it just didn't make any sense. And so by the end of the movie, she's like, look, I'm here, I'm in blue jeans, I can live your life, I can travel light, like, I can do this, I can do that. And it's like, but you actually don't have to. There's no one that says you do. That's his job. Why would you go with him on his trips for his job?
Like, I feel
doesn't
like
make any sense.
I feel like the case she is making to him is, you get to keep your life, but when you do come home to New York, instead of living in this little shithole, you'll live at my great apartment,
my fancy penthouse.
And instead of being alone, you get to have sex with me.
And he, for some reason, rejects this.
Hates it.
Yeah, hates it.
And it doesn't even turn out that it's, like, just an extension of his own self-doubt. Like, it's nothing. That never happens in the movie. Like, all the things he's saying about why she shouldn't be interested in him are kind of presented as facts in the movie.
Yeah.
It's not presented as anything wrong with him or an arc he needs to have.
Yeah.
He goes on no great journey.
The other totally unimportant thing that
unless you're talking about the journey from his window down to the down to the sidewalk below.
I broke my other leg. The other thing totally inconsequential to the plot that I really appreciated, and then we can talk about the plot, is so, like, she comes over and he's, like, kind of feeling a little bit sorry for himself because he's just sitting around because he's got this broken leg and he can't go out and he can't really do anything. And she's like, it's fine, I've brought dinner to you. And in comes this waiter from, like, the 21 Club. You know, they're dressed in, like, as jockeys, I guess, in, like, those red jackets. And she's like, please come in, you'll find the oven in the kitchen, you can warm the things, and here, I'll take the champagne. And they've brought in this fancy dinner with, like, lobster and champagne and all of these things, and then they're having this kind of, like, very kind of intense conversation and almost fight about the future of their relationship. And I was like, two things. One, fancy dinners never get eaten in movies when there's an emotional conversation happening. And I was like, do not let that dinner go to waste. And they, to their credit, they did eat the dinner, I believe.
Yeah.
Two, I just appreciated that, like, fancy takeout spans the decades, you know? Like, today, if we want to get, like, today we definitely draw the distinction between takeout and fancy takeout, especially in COVID times. And I just appreciated that it was like, no, this is fancy takeout. This is very special, but it's still possible to acquire in 1954. If you have enough money, you can get the guy from 21 to come to your house and serve you lobster.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Trying to think of how this is another piece of evidence to say how she's undateable.
Yeah. Do you want to, well, because she has her own money.
Yeah.
Because she was the one that arranged for all this. And you know she's not going to let him pay her back.
That does make him less of a man.
Yeah. Well, that was probably why they get into this intense conversation, because he's like, I can never support you in the style to which you've become accustomed. And she's like, I can never support you in the style to which you have become accustomed. And she's
accustomed.
like, well, why would you? I have a job. And he's like, that's a problem. Anyway.
Have you ever shit in a hole? Lisa, have you ever shit in a hole? If you travel with me, you'll be shitting in nothing but holes.
Basically the substance of their conversation. So
Except
anyway,
he's wagging his finger a lot at her
Yeah.
while he's doing it.
so anyway, he's been looking out the window a lot in between beautiful Lisa and fun Thelma Ritter coming to visit him and do things for him. And there's all these neighbors across the way. They're all doing different things. There's Miss Torso, the ballet dancer, who's doing parties. There's Miss Lonely Hearts, who's drinking a lot. There's
The dog parents who sleep on their
the dog
fire
parents.
escape.
They're super cute. They sleep on their fire escape because it's so hot. And there's the
Did you look up the thing about the dog before it happened?
yeah, I looked it up on doesthedogdie.com.
Okay.
The answer was yes.
Yes.
There's the young married couple that are constantly having sex with
Well,
each
also
other
fighting.
and fighting.
Well, because they are the proof to Jeff that he should not settle down with Lisa.
Right, because
they're unhappy.
They're unhappy.
Yeah.
I think that's it. I'm getting some
There's
of
the
them conflated.
musician.
The musician.
Because Hitch was in the musician's apartment. That was his
That's
little
right.
cameo.
That's right. And he's always having fancy parties
Yeah.
too.
There's the busybody who lives underneath Mrs. Torso.
Right.
Can I say I'm gonna say the thing that kind of like I had forgotten about this movie, even though in retrospect it's one of the things that people have talked about for years being one of the great things about this movie.
Yeah.
The geography of it is amazing.
Yeah, it's really
Like,
fun.
So everything it does in the first 10 minutes of the movie just makes you understand exactly where every single person is, where every apartment is, where every person in every apartment is in relation to every other person in every other apartment, where they all are in relation to Jeff. I mean, it's one of the best sets that I think has ever been built because the whole thing, the entire movie takes place on one set.
Yeah.
And
you're never in any other location but inside his apartment building.
yeah, and like the set is incredible. The lighting is incredible because they managed to make it look like New York at, daybreak and midday and night and sunset. Like they do a beautiful job making this feel real.
Yeah.
It's just a gorgeous set and they shot it beautifully.
Yeah.
And the visual storytelling is incredible.
It's very cool. And the other thing you kind of pointed out was that, for example, Dial M for Murder really felt like a play because it was just in the apartment and was a play and could be done easily as a play with very, very little alteration. This one takes place in a single apartment, but in order to do it as a play, you would really have to get creative because you the audience actually do need to see all of this stuff happening.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it would be as impactful or interesting if you were like only having it described or only seeing it like through a character's eyes. And so I said to you, like, you could do one of two things. You could do it with like projections, or you could actually build like this giant set with like with the wall removed, like August Osage County, and just position his apartment in a different place. But that might feel kind of weird. It would be really interesting, I think, to try to do it as a play because you'd have this huge cast of characters that basically have no lines.
Yeah. I don't know. To me, it feels like, and I think this was something that Hitchcock talked about later, because I think I didn't do any research about what I'm about to say, so I might be a little wrong on this. But like, you know about the movie Rope?
Sure.
The Hitchcock one that's like all, quote unquote one take. It
Yeah.
has like a couple of cuts in it.
Isn't it like on a train or something?
Well, that's Strangers, on, a train. No, Rope is the one where the movie starts with these guys killing a guy and then putting his body in a box.
Yeah.
And then the whole thing takes place in the apartment.
Yeah.
But it's all one shot.
Okay.
And I want to say that one of the things that even Hitchcock said about it later is that he was disappointed in it because it wasn't cinematic.
Yeah.
Because it really was just done like a play.
Yeah.
That was one of the things we didn't really love about Dial M for Murder.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that as time went on, like he leaned into the cinema of it.
Yeah.
Like this Rear Window is incredibly cinematic.
Yeah.
Rear Window, I think, has to be a movie. And I think one of the reasons for that, like, yeah, I guess you could do it as a play. And I know I'm skipping ahead when I say this, but to me, there is the shot in this movie.
Yeah.
The shot that is the most suspenseful and the most like it makes your heart stop, that kind of thing. And it's when he's got his binoculars and Lisa, we'll get to it, but Lisa has broken into the murderer's apartment across the way and the cops have come in and the murderer's there and she's trying to signal something to him. And so his binoculars are like pointed down at her trying to signal him. But then he goes up to the murderer's face and the murderer is looking right down the barrel.
Yeah, and I didn't know that was a shot in the movie, but I had anticipated that it would be. So every time he was looking in with the binoculars, I was like, what if that guy just looks up at him right now? And then he did, and I was like, ah.
But it's a beautiful moment.
Yeah, and it really like, I don't know, I haven't seen a ton of Hitchcock movies, and so it really made me realize what people appreciate about Hitchcock as a director, because I do remember seeing Dial M for Murder and going like, this is not cinematic at all.
Yeah.
Like, what do people... I guess I genuinely don't understand why this man is considered a master of cinema, and because it wasn't a very cinematic movie. He did it like a play,
Mhm.
and I didn't find it very successful as a film. But this was great.
Yeah.
Really, really good.
I mean, we haven't even talked about the
The plot.
Thorwalds.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead.
So Raymond Burr plays Lars Thorwald, who is the murderer who lives across the way. We had a very funny conversation about this. He was like, that's Raymond Burr. Remember from Godzilla King of the Monsters, the weird like American thing? You were like, man, he really let himself go after that. And
He's
then I
so
looked and I was
old.
like, yeah, this was 2 years before that. Raymond Burr was a big guy.
Yeah.
That was his whole thing. And Raymond Burr, like, kind of unrecognizable with his like gray hair and glasses and everything
Sure,
like
sure.
that. And he's great because you don't even hear his voice for most of the movie. He's
Yeah.
just doing this very physical performance. You know, it's very voyeuristic. We're just seeing him in his apartment. And so it's weird for me to say that Raymond Burr's great in this movie, but like Raymond Burr's pretty great in this movie.
I think you have to like be great to kind of pull this off
Mhm.
because he doesn't have a lot to work with. He's just basically body language and eye acting, of which there's a lot
Yeah.
in this film.
I mean, what do you want to say about the murder?
So basically, Jimmy Stewart is observing all of these neighbors out the window, and this one couple, he notices that the wife always stays in the apartment. She seems like she never leaves the apartment. The husband goes to work, and it seems like she's like sick in bed a lot, or like he's always bringing her things. Like she just never leaves, and she's ill. And then one day he happens to notice that like her blinds are down, and she's just seems like she's not there. And he thinks that's really weird because she never leaves the apartment ever,
Mhm.
and she never lowers her blinds ever. So he just thinks it's really odd. And then he just notices that the guy is having a lot of weird behaviors. He's going in and out like at weird times of the night, and he seems like he's packing things, and he's carrying bags and carrying boxes, and he's just seems anxious and nervous, and just lots of changes in this guy's habits. And still, like a couple of days have gone by, and he hasn't seen the wife. And he's talking to Thelma Ritter, and he's talking to Grace Kelly, and he's like, I think he murdered his wife. And he's like chopping her body up in the apartment and taking her body all around town. And then there's this dog that lives in the apartment building that turns up dead, and it's very suspicious. Like, who would kill a dog? Like, why would anyone kill a little dog? And maybe it was because he's sniffing in the flower bed, and there's something in the flower bed that he doesn't want dug up, which turns out to kind of be a red herring.
Well, there was something in the flower bed, but then he moved it
Right.
and killed the dog.
And killed the dog.
Yeah, that wasn't in the short story. The dog's mom just
Yeah.
kind of like yelling at everyone.
At every
You're like,
neighbor.
how could you do this?
My poor dog.
And like I'm saying it like it was funny.
It was
Again, I'm
very
laughing.
sad.
I'm laughing because of how uncomfortable it made me because
It
it
wa-
was really heartbreaking.
It was really cute that they took the dog up and down in a basket
Yeah.
off the fire escape.
Should I link to the corgi elevator?
Yeah. So Jeremy and I think even before pre-pandemic, and maybe even a little bit into it, we got very, very into tiny house videos on YouTube. And there's this one amazing couple, these like middle-aged women, and they built this tiny house together. And they were like, yeah, well, one of the things that we were really concerned about, because usually in a tiny house, like the bedroom is sort of a loft, a stair
Mhm.
with a ladder that goes up. And they were like, we were really concerned because our corgi, has a hard time. We couldn't climb a ladder. And our corgi, when we were doing this build out, like he can't climb a ladder, but he loves to sleep with us. So what could we do? So we built him an elevator. And sure enough, you see the little corgi. It's like a little wooden elevator it's basically a dumbwaiter that they put the dog into, and he's very happy to go. And they can hoist him down, and they can hoist him back up again. And he's trained to go in and out of the elevator, and so he can sleep with them at night. And it's just
I think
the
about it
sweetest thing
every
in the world.
day.
I think about it many times a day.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, that's what it reminded me of.
Yeah.
I'll link to that.
You'll link to the corgi
in the show
elevator.
notes.
That was the best episode of that tiny house show,
Mhm.
literally ever. I forgot where I was going with this because I was thinking about the corgi elevator. So anyway, he calls his friend, right? His police officer friend, and was like, "Hey, there's suspicious behavior. Like, can you do the thing?"
The guy tells him, "No,
No, I cannot.
I can't do anything.
So
I'll
his-
look into it a little, but I'm not going to do what you want me to do."
So then he's mentions it to Thelma Ritter, and Thelma Ritter's on board like immediately. She's like, "Oh yeah, absolutely. I bet he did it." Like
So
she's bloodthirsty.
I wrote down the line, just how would you start to cut up a human body? Was that Thelma Ritter
I think so.
or was it Lisa?
No, I think it was Thelma Ritter.
I think so, yeah. Because then after that, there's the moment where he's talking to Lisa about it, and there's this turn where suddenly she's very interested.
Yeah.
Like, he thinks she's not going to be into it. And that's the whole thing is the reason we're not going to work, Lisa, is because you're not adventurous. You're not adventurous at all. But I'm going to tell you about this murder. And because you're not an adventurous person, you're not going to be interested. And she goes, oh, no, fuck you. I am very interested
Well,
in that.
it takes him a little while to talk. She's like, no, impossible. And then she notices this whole situation with like, so the woman is supposed to be out of town, or she went off somewhere, and she's like, oh, well, she left her perfume and her jewelry behind, and I know women, and women would never travel. This is very suspicious. And then anytime it gets brought up, she's like, but what about the perfume? What about the jewelry?
Yeah. And even he's going to his detective friend going like, but what about the perfume?
Yeah.
What about the jewelry?
So it takes him about a day, I think, to talk her into it, but then she's like on board,
and it's just a fun little turn.
Yeah.
And like, this is where he starts to fall in love with her.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't into her before, but now that she's a little bloodthirsty, now he's into her.
I find your detective solving very sexy.
Mhm.
And so she's like, yeah, because he can't go, like, just to be clear, he's still got this broken leg and he can't go anywhere, he can't do anything. So she's like, I'm going to go over there. I'm going to look for clues. I'm going to try to find her wedding ring. Because if I can find her wedding ring in the house, I will know that she did not leave of her own accord, because she would never travel without a wedding ring. Yes.
So I just want to jump in for a second. This was, I think, one of the really good changes that they made from the original short story. Because in the original short story, Sam is the one he sends across to go into the apartment.
Yeah.
And like, Sam doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
He's just making this guy do it
Yeah.
because he can't. At least in this one, Lisa's like, I am a willing participant in this.
And Sam isn't even
Put me in, coach.
And Sam isn't even looking for evidence. So they do the thing both in the short story and the movie where he calls and can see him answer, and can see Thorwald answer the phone and say like, I know, he sends him a note first and he's like, what did you do with your wife, or something like that. And then he calls and says, meet me in 15 minutes and we can discuss this, blah, 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 to get him out of the house. And then he sends, in the short story, he sends Sam over. In the movie, he sends Grace Kelly over. But like, he doesn't send Sam over to like get anything or look for anything. He says just rifle through things and like move things in subtle ways, but it'll make it clear that someone was there. He wants him to think someone was there when he was out, just to kind of throw him off or freak him out. But in the movie, he's like, no, you're going over and looking for like her ring and her jewelry and where her stuff is. And she finds like a purse that's like her favorite handbag, and it's full of her jewelry. And she was like, this lady would not leave without her handbag and her jewelry, because this is clearly her daily carry handbag. She wouldn't travel without it.
So I think you're jumping ahead a little bit, because they see the handbag already.
Right.
So that conversation you're talking about happened before she ever broke in.
But she didn't know it was full of her jewelry.
No. They did, because he saw Thorwald open it and take all the jewelry out.
Gotcha.
And then when he sends Thelma Ritter and Lisa down to look, this is like, do you know what it reminded me of? Do you know the whole thing, the Hemingway quote about bankruptcy?
No.
Where like, so these two guys are talking in a book, and one guy's gone bankrupt, and one guy says to him like, oh, how did that happen? And the other guy's, well, really slowly and then all at once.
Sure.
Right? That's kind of how this movie goes.
Yeah.
Like, everything, they're just kind of methodically going through the plot and going through the motions, and then suddenly everything becomes really, really fast and happens really quickly at the end. So like, in my mind, Lisa breaks into the apartment like 3 times.
Yeah.
But like, no, she goes over once to slip the note under the door,
Right.
comes back, and then in the third act, he sends the two of them down to look in the flower bed because they're convinced she's buried in the flower bed.
Right.
And there she decides, no, I'm breaking into this
I'm
guy's
going
fucking
in,
apartment.
yeah.
And he's even against it. He's like, no, but he can't yell at her.
Yeah.
He can't do anything. But she breaks in and finds the handbag and is like, it's empty. Now
Yeah.
it's empty. We saw that he was taking the jewelry out of it,
Right.
but now it's empty. Oh, and by the way, Thorwald's home.
Yeah. But she's got the ring.
Yes.
And so he calls the police to the apartment. And so the interesting thing is he calls the police before Thorwald even shows up, because he can see he's coming back,
Right.
and calls them and says there's a man assaulting a woman before any assault has occurred, because he can see it is about to occur. And then the police show up, and of course Grace Kelly, being a beautiful white woman, they're like, oh yeah, no, I'm sure that you have a reason to be here. I mean, we are going to take you down to the station for some questioning, but like, ma'am, please come this way.
I mean, at least they do act like they need to bail her out.
Yeah.
They're like, no, she's being arrested.
Yeah.
Like, she needs to get bailed out.
Yeah.
They're not going to let her off with a slap on the wrist.
Yeah, they're not going to be like, just go home. And that I think is when we do. I think that's when we get that look.
She finds the ring.
Right.
And so what we see from Jeff's point of view is he's looking through the binoculars at her. She's turned her back to the window and she's pointing at her hand and she's wearing the ring.
Right.
and while she's being arrested, and so she's pointing to him that she has it, and that's when he looks up at Thorwald because Thorwald has seen that she has the ring,
Right.
and now he's staring down the barrel.
Right.
And then they all leave,
Right.
and then
then-
then we get what it feels like an hour,
Yeah.
but it must be like 3 minutes.
Well, it was very suspenseful.
Yeah.
It was a very suspenseful 3 minutes. It's like he knows he's coming in.
like Thorwald's coming over to Jeff's apartment.
over to Jeff's
Everyone's
apartment.
gone.
Yeah, and he's like, I don't think the door is locked, and I don't think I can get to the door fast enough
Yeah.
to lock it. And it's just a very primal fear of being kind of trapped and helpless and knowing someone is coming to harm you
Mhm.
and not really being able to do anything about it. And anyway, there's this sort of physical altercation and the
Well, what happens before the physical altercation? Because this was the thing I said I always remembered
okay.
that I didn't like.
Oh, yeah. That is dumb. Go ahead.
I'd love for you to describe it, actually.
Okay, so he's a photographer, right? So this is like Chekhov's flashbulb. So the guy's coming towards him. Thorwald's coming towards Jimmy Stewart. And Jimmy Stewart, all he has, God bless him, all he has is his camera and a stack of flashbulbs. And so what he keeps doing to just buy himself a little bit of time and put this guy off and throw him off is just like he keeps putting in a new flashbulb, flashing it right in the guy's eyes, and the guy goes, "Oh!" every single time. Like it really slows him down.
He's like, he really looks like Frankenstein's monster and fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and it was just funny after the first like 2 or 3 flashbulbs, I was like, I mean, at this point he knows it's coming. Like he could just look another
Yeah.
direction or close his eyes or something so he doesn't, because like obviously like a flashbulb flashing in your face in the dark is going to totally blind you and disorient you, especially if you don't know it's coming. But if you know it's coming, it seems like there are sort of things you could do to not be so disoriented by it. It just seems like it's almost, he's very like, and maybe this is what Hitchcock was going for, like almost like an animal, like he's advancing on him, but he doesn't have guile or a plan. It's just very instinctual that he's kind of attacking him.
I guess so. This is one of those moments where I'm sure someone will tell me the thing that I hate and have always tried not to say. Just because you didn't get it doesn't mean it's bad. And I'm sure people would try to give me that argument. But bottom line, like I just don't think it works.
I mean, it was just very jarring in what was otherwise a very delicately and intricately plotted movie.
Mhm.
And you don't really need it. Like it's his one defense, and I get it, but it was certainly jarring, frankly, how stupid it was in a movie that is not stupid
Yeah.
at all and has a very, very interesting and suspenseful plot.
And he still ends up in a physical altercation with the guy anyway and ends
Yeah.
up getting hung out the window.
Right?
Like-
And breaking his other leg.
Like, and then he falls. That was the other thing that got me is like he falls and the shot of him falling, it's just, it's clearly like rotoscoped.
Yeah.
Like it's just Jimmy Stewart standing there, but they've rotoscoped him and made him smaller. So he's like falling. And like, I just don't think it looks very good. And so for me, the end is this kind of 1-2 punch of the flashbulb thing is a little dumb, and also him falling doesn't look very good.
Right.
And yeah, it just kind of, it deflates the movie for me a little bit.
Sure.
And at the time, the first time I saw it, it like really deflated the movie for me. This time though, like only a little.
Yeah,
like
because
only a
then
little.
it redeems itself again at the end. Like the end is very suspenseful and fun.
Yeah, and it is also really funny because, as you said before,
I broke my other leg. It
Like,
just makes me think of the
it is-
producers.
it is a funny little epilogue that
Yeah.
he broke his other leg
He
in
broke
the
his
fall.
other leg. Yeah, and then
And it's
there's
like the day before he's getting the cast taken
yeah,
off.
and there's this cute little button, which is like now it's the fall, so it's cooler. So when he sits in front of the window, it's very pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
And Grace Kelly's there, and she's in her blue jeans, but she's still reading a fashion magazine.
Well,
and
she's reading like isn't she reading like a survival book?
Oh,
and then
yeah.
when she realizes he's asleep, she puts it down and picks up a fashion magazine.
right. But they've
'Cause of women.
Because they've made it work, and it's very sweet.
Mm-hmm.
The end.
But like, what a great movie!
It's great. Really recommend.
It's so good.
Really recommend watching it.
And here's the thing, I am actually super open to anybody explaining to me why the flashbulb thing is actually fantastic. I think it's kind of lame. That's where I sit right now. But boy, what a good movie.
Yeah. So in 1998,
Mm-hmm.
I had never seen this before, but I remember hearing about it
Mm-hmm.
when it came out. Because I remember when Christopher Reeve had his accident. Like, I remember that happening.
Yeah.
And I remember when he died. Like, I remember where I was when I heard that he died. For whatever reason, it made a big impression on me that, like, he had passed away.
Mhm.
You know, sometimes you don't remember, like, the exact place and time and where you were when you heard a piece of news. This, I absolutely know
Yeah.
exactly where I was.
Where were you when you heard?
I was abroad. I was doing my year abroad, and I was in the computer lab because we didn't have internet in our apartments. So I had to go to the computer lab to, like, check the news, and
Mhm.
that's where I was when I remember seeing that story. And it was
Yes, huge bummer.
a bummer.
Mhm.
So anyway, not to talk about
I mean, but like we're
bummer.
gonna keep talking about it because it's kind of the
It-
basis of this movie.
Yeah. So I remember when they made this remake. I totally remember hearing about it. I could be wrong, but I don't remember that Christopher Reeve like made any other movies other than this once he had his his injury and becoming a quadriplegic. Like maybe he was in some documentaries or something like as himself, but did he act again other than this film?
Yeah, he did a little bit of acting. One actually I'd completely forgotten about, but it was kind of cool. So he was in The Practice,
Mm-hmm.
apparently. I think for like one episode. And he was also in 2 episodes of Smallville,
Interesting.
which
Interesting.
was really, now I remember, it was really cool.
Yeah. But this was starring in a full length feature film.
These were not starring roles.
Yeah.
Like that was him doing a Superman cameo.
Sure. So the movie begins really, really interestingly, and I'm just gonna keep saying how interesting this was because I found it fascinating. It begins with his accident, and there's a man, he's an architect, and he's driving down the road one night. He's not drunk or anything, but
We don't even see him.
we don't even see him. And he gets in this car accident, just one of these like sort of twist of fate things, and you see him wake up in a hospital room, and he's got a ventilator, and he's a quadriplegic. And what you see at the beginning of the film is just a lot of stuff about sort of his recovery and rehab, getting out of the hospital and going back home again. I mean, clearly this is a man with a lot of money. And we hear a lot about how the house has been kind of rehabbed and renovated to allow for him to live in it safely.
Apparently, a lot of the opening was shot at the Burke Rehabilitation Center in White Plains, New York,
Uh-huh.
where Reeve had been treated.
Yeah, and there was a ton of stuff in there that was, I would imagine, taken from life.
Yeah.
Would be my guess. Like just a lot of his conversations with people. There's an incident that happens that like his ventilator becomes unplugged and he can't breathe and the nurse can't figure it out to fix it, and it's like seemed like he was about to die, and then another nurse came in and you said to me that was something that really happened.
Yeah, my understanding is that was based on fact, but like, so it's doing two different things.
Yeah.
Like one, it was actually based on his real experience, which was one of the things that made it really effective, but also it does come back later.
Right. It becomes a plot point.
It becomes Chekhov's ventilator
Yeah.
in the third act.
Right. So basically the first, 15, 20 minutes of the movie are essentially Christopher Reeve playing himself and going through his own lived experience about what it was like to have a sudden accident and be rehabilitated in this way and have your life change incredibly significantly, particularly around the way that you need people to help you. And I think that was a really like big theme of this movie, is the way that you feel helpless as someone that needs a lot of things from other people and that has to ask people to do things for you, and that someone who can't do even like the simplest of tasks for yourself, and how humbling that feels to someone who that has not been their experience prior to now.
It's one of the smart things I think too about the screenplay, that I can imagine the lazy version of the screenplay adaptation would be, I'm just going to do the structure of Rear Window, but we have Christopher Reeve, so instead of a broken leg, he's quadriplegic.
Right.
But we're still going to start it the same way, where he's already in the apartment
Right.
with his ailment.
Right.
But that kind of sells the whole thing short, because it takes away, because being a quadriplegic is way different than I'm in a cast for 8 weeks.
Right.
And so we need that time to set things up. Like, it's actually kind of, I can imagine someone loving Rear Window and watching this going like, why are we spending so much time before he's even back at his apartment? But like, it kind of works because it's Christopher Reeve exercising this very, very, like, these very personal demons, right? Through art.
Yeah, and it is actually kind of important to the plot that this way of living is new to him.
Yeah.
It's not something that he's been living with for many, many years. It is a new thing for him, and his emotional acceptance of it is not actually that important. It's literally more about physically what he's able to do and accomplish. Which kind of ties into the end, which is really, really fun. But we'll get to that in a second. I mean, there is sort of the Christopher Reeve stuff I will just mention, and only briefly. Like, there's a definite plot of him being very angry with someone who is talking to him about not being able to walk ever again, and being very angry and saying, you don't know that, like, there's new research all the time, and I thoroughly plan that this is not a permanent state for me. And that was Christopher Reeve, right? Like, he was very, very convinced that technology or slash medicine would enable him to walk again. And that gets into the end too, where he I'm not going to spoil the love interest because I really want to talk about it, but he basically says to her, like, it's not always going to be this way, but for now. And she's like, yeah, no, it's fine. And that was Christopher Reeve's whole thing, which I think some people in the disability community have had trouble with. I think this idea that, like, I want to say this in the fairest way possible, that the quote unquote cure is not necessarily a goal. Whether you can walk or you can't walk does not, like, define you as a human being in terms of your worth, right? Like, that's pretty basic stuff. But I know that the way that he expressed his feelings about his disability was often controversial to some people in the disability community. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Like, and I think the thing that makes it, if it works, I think the thing that makes it work is that it was what he said, and he is the character,
yes,
and he's playing the character.
Right.
So it's not like he's putting the words in someone else's mouth.
Yeah, it would hit really, really differently if it was a non-disabled producer and screenwriter putting those words in the mouth of a non-disabled actor who was playing disabled. But because it's Christopher Reeve producing this movie that is so germane to his own personal experience, and also, not for nothing, like, a fine example of representation. Like, I don't believe I have ever seen a quadriplegic actor playing a quadriplegic character in a feature-length movie ever. Have you ever seen that before?
I'm going to say no, not that I'm saying it hasn't happened.
I'm not saying it hasn't happened.
It is certainly not. Like, here's the thing. I can think of a lot of movies I've seen where a character has been either paraplegic or quadriplegic, and all the examples I'm thinking of are all actors who are acting.
Yes, correct. For not for nothing, this was literally the topic of my master's thesis.
Yeah.
Which I was going to say I'm happy to send to anyone. You don't want to read it. It's fine. But may I talk about my master's thesis for a moment?
Sure.
This is, like, the most relevant it's ever going to be. There is an enormous tradition of deaf capital D theater and ASL theater in this country. And so that interested me. And that was what I started my research on. And I realized that was not a thesis. That was just a research project. So what it turned into was sort of half about the history of deaf theater. And people always think I'm saying death theater. I don't know what it is about my enunciation. Deaf, DEAF, or hard of hearing theater in this country in particular, which was often tied into sort of the legacy of deaf schools and ASL going in and out of fashion. Like, there have been different, like, movements in this country around deaf education where educators were like, sign language is great. It enables people to communicate, back to no, deaf children need to be taught to speak and read lips and not use sign language, all the way back to hopefully where we are now, which is that ASL is a language in and of itself and should be taught to anyone who wants to know it, but particularly, to deaf children and adults. And many people use ASL as their first language, and I find ASL really, really fascinating just as a language, like, semantically. But what this ties into is the sort of legacy of non-disabled actors, and I went to school for theater, so I was talking particularly about theater as opposed to movies, but this happens in movies, of course, too, all the time, of non-disabled actors playing disabled characters. And in particular, I talked a lot about non-deaf actors playing deaf characters, because there are lots of plays that have a deaf character and that utilize ASL where a non-disabled actor is cast in that role. And part of my argument, I guess, is that there is this incredibly strong tradition of deaf theater. There is a pool to draw from of deaf actors to play deaf characters in mainstream things. And this was happening right around the time that Abigail Breslin was playing Helen Keller in The Miracle Worker. There was a production of Carson McCullers, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, in New York right about that time, that the main character is deaf. And I had a lot of problems with the way that they cast a non-deaf actor in that part, and the way that ASL was used, which I can talk about another time. And it's cool and relevant, like, even now with Coda being at the Academy Awards and Troy Kotsur winning the Academy Award as the first deaf actor ever to win that award, playing a deaf character, is very relevant, is what I'm saying. So it was fascinating for me to just bring back to Rear Window to see this example of disability representation with an actor who is a wonderful actor. Like it's just like you forget how good actors can act with their faces. And it was like a joke I had made when we watched the 1954 Rear Window of like, oh, there's a lot of eye acting going on in this. But there really was a lot of eye acting going on in this. And he's so good and so personable and so funny and just a fine actor. It was just quite lovely and unusual and a kind of a wonderful thing to see someone with such a profound disability playing someone with that disability and carrying a movie. And I thought that was so cool. So any quibbles that we have with this movie, I would just love to be taken in that context that this was truly enjoyable and interesting to watch.
I mean, but that's the thing. Like, I think the thing that is good is that the movie ended up not being a piece of crap.
Right.
Because that would have made it the huge bummer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But, like, thankfully, it didn't end up being a huge piece of crap. Like, it's not great. It has a lot of problems. It has a lot of problems that every TV movie from 1998 has.
Oh, yeah. It had a lot of technology problems.
Yeah. Like, we could spend longer than what you just went through talking about just the way email is treated in this movie. But
the technology plot was not good.
Yeah, like let's not do that.
Leave that be.
There are these lapses of logic. Like I'll name one. He doesn't use binoculars because he's quadriplegic.
Right.
Instead, he sends his nurse Antonio, who's Ruben Santiago Hudson, who I didn't know is the guy who wrote Lackawanna Blues. I didn't know he's a theater guy.
Oh, yeah. That I didn't know about Lackawanna Blues, but there's a lot of New York theater people in this for sure. I mean, Christopher Reeve and his wife, Dana Reeve, were big, like, New York theater people. I actually met her at this is really sad. I met her at the Williamstown Theater Festival because she was performing there the summer before I went to Oxford. So that was actually probably why him dying made such an impression on me, because I just met his wife the summer before, and then she died like a year later. She died of lung cancer at 44. Like, man, just such tragedy in that family. Anyway, I don't know where to go from there.
Yeah, so let's get back to the bullshit thing in this movie that was kind of stupid.
Yeah.
So he sends Antonio to go get him a shitload of video surveillance equipment because there's this guy living. Instead of being like, it's not the same building, there is a building across the alley, and he can see into all the apartments, and it's clearly like one of these areas that used to be like, it used to be the meatpacking district or something like that.
Yeah,
and everything's been converted
into
of
lofts.
Yeah.
Like loft apartments.
Right?
Yeah.
So we look and they do the same thing where we see, like, there's Miss Lonely Hearts and there's, the gay couple living upstairs. Like, that struck me as being like, oh, it's the 90s.
It's the 90s.
It's the 90s.
There's a musician.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that also the gay couple?
No, I thought there was a different guy that's a musician.
Gotcha. There's a guy who works on computers all day who wears headphones.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? That's the guy I'm thinking of, I think.
But there's also this artist who lives across the way, Julian Thorpe, played by Richie Coster, and his wife, Eileen Thorpe, played by Allison Mackey, who, just in case anyone else has the question you had, not Allison Mack, also from Smallville, who was in a cult and is now, I believe, in jail.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, she's in jail for, like, sex trafficking.
A long time.
Yeah.
Allison Mackey.
Yes.
Different person.
Different person.
She plays, I'm just going to spoil this. She plays Eileen Thorpe and Eileen's twin sister. And it's all part of the plot. It's all part of the murder plot. But he becomes convinced that Julian has killed his wife, Eileen. And so he tells Antonio, go out and get me all this video surveillance equipment. And, like, Antonio and also Claudia Henderson, who also works at the architecture firm, who is Daryl Hannah, who becomes the love interest.
I have some things to say about Daryl Hannah.
I know. They are like, they have no scruples.
They're super into it.
They're all into it. They're like, oh no, let's fucking spy on this guy. Totally. So they get all this video equipment. So he's got this whole setup with all these cameras pointed. He can control the whole thing with the little tube he uses to control his chair. And the thing about it is, and all of this preamble, all of this is to say, if the guy looks up at the window, Christopher Reeve always has this thing where, like, he needs to back away into the shadow so that the guy can't see him. But even though he's backing into the shadow, it doesn't change the fact that all of the video surveillance equipment is completely viewable in the bright light of day.
Yeah.
So him backing away doesn't do anything.
Just for shit.
So, like, the movie has a lot of that kind of stuff in it. We never even mentioned it, but I do want to say it was directed by Jeff Bleckner. It was co-written by Eric Overmyer and Larry Gross. Larry Gross was a little interesting because he co-wrote 48 Hours, but Eric Overmyer, way more interesting. And I feel like any quality in the script is explained to me because Eric Overmyer wrote on or produced in some capacity or developed in some capacity Homicide, Life on the Streets, Law and Order, The Wire, Treme, Boardwalk Empire, Bosch. Like, these are lots of good TV shows.
Sure.
And so this strikes me as, I think it's one of the reasons why the script is, I think, actually pretty good.
It's not bad.
Yeah, even though it has a lot of issues.
It suffers from being 1998.
Yeah.
But I don't think it suffers from being 1998 more than anything else.
Certainly a TV movie
from
in
that
1998.
Yeah, can I give you my my two favorite technology lines?
Sure.
Actually, from the script now that we're sort of circling that drain. They're talking about the artist and they're trying to get his email because, of course, they're going to threaten him with an email rather than with a note slipped under his door. And somebody at one point says, let's just hope he does business over the internet. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
Would you like to tell everyone your favorite line about the internet?
Yeah, I'll just mention it quickly. I think I've mentioned it on the show before. In some episode of The West Wing, something has occurred that the president and his staff would prefer not to have occurred.
Well, they prefer that people didn't know about it.
And which I guess is the same thing.
Yeah.
And someone says, so the press has the story, and someone else says it's going to break tomorrow. It's on the internet already. It's like, if it's on the internet, I have some sour news for you. It's already broken. Just the idea that there was a time that there was a piece of news that was known in the world and would not, quote, break until tomorrow is mind-blowing to me. Just mind-blowing.
And that's Aaron Sorkin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so anyway, just my second favorite technology line from this movie is when the artist does show up at his apartment and is accusing him of being the one who sent the email.
And he's got all this video surveillance equipment, and he's sitting there going, I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know what you're talking about. And the guy's like, well, I'll just check your email directory. And if my email address isn't there, I'll be on my way. It's like, what are you talking about?
This guy is he's a very technologically savvy.
But he says it in
heavy.
the most, I didn't say it right because he says it in the most menacing, evil way. I'll just check your email directory.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yep.
Anyway, do you want to talk about Daryl Hannah for a second?
Sure. Let's talk about Daryl Hannah. I guess just to bring it back, yes, we are saying things that it suffers from, but it still is pretty good.
Yes.
Here's another thing it suffers from. Go ahead.
I personally do not find Daryl Hannah to be a very fine actor. And this, as you pointed out, was the same year she made Addams Family Reunion.
Yeah.
Which was dog shit from beginning to end. Just truly one of the worst things we've ever seen. And I also find that in this film, the filmmakers have done her a disservice and maybe we're sort of trying to make her look more plain and normal, would be my guess. Or maybe it was just 1998 and that's what people were wearing. I find her costuming and hairstyling in this movie incredibly unflattering. She wears a lot of headbands and it's just not a good look for her.
How many people looked good in 1998?
Fair. That's fair. 1998 was a big headband year.
Yeah.
There's a lot of headbands.
She's got the little thing. What is it? How do you describe it?
Oh, God. I don't know how you would describe it. I had one. It's like a sort of a stretchy headband that
it's plastic.
It's
it looks
plastic.
like teeth.
It looks like teeth. It's like a circle with points pointing in. And so you like scrape your hair back really, really tight and then you stick these points into your hair. And it was not a good look for anyone. But she wears one in this film. And it's not good.
Yeah, it's definitely, it is not doing her any favors.
It's not doing her any favors.
I feel like I need to say a thing that I actually make. I literally make this exact case in the Disturbia episode of Multiplex Time Machine.
Yeah.
About the love interest in that, who also is not very good in Disturbia. I want to be clear that, like, I don't blame the actor for this.
No.
Like, it's not the actor's fault. It's the director's fault. It's the casting director's fault. It's the producer's fault. The editor not picking the best takes, or maybe the editor did pick the best takes. But, like, an actor puts a lot of trust in people to make sure they're getting the best performance.
Yeah.
And if they weren't getting a good performance, they should have done something about it.
Yeah.
And so I just want to be clear, I don't blame Daryl Hannah.
No.
But I agree with you, she's not good in this.
She's not good in this. And so her character is another architect from his firm, like I think like a junior architect that's been coming over to sort of help him with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But she sort of turns into just his like almost like personal assistant. So then at the end when like the building is being dedicated that they've been working on, he's like, I just want to thank Daryl Hannah, for all her assistance. And it's like, yeah, but if she's an architect in her own right, like she's not just like his assistant.
Well, no, she was working on the project while he was convalescing.
No, I understand that, but like
Like, she was
I-
heavily involved
I
in
feel
it.
that she doesn't get enough credit for being a professional
Yeah.
at work, I guess is what I'm saying.
I mean, she was the only one who went to the meeting where they actually chose the artwork for the lobby, because the artwork they choose for the lobby is the murderer artist's sculpture that they're convinced has a dead body inside
And it does.
Well, no, it doesn't. Not the one in the lobby.
No, the one in the lobby
The one in the lobby does not have
does
a dead
not
body
have a
in
dead
it.
body
What
in
they
it.
didn't know is there was a second bronze cast of the sculpture that was up on the top floor of the building that the
Oh.
artist lived in. And so the last shot of the movie is the camera zooming in on that one up to the base of it, telling you, oh no, the wife's body's in that copy of the sculpture, not the one in the lobby.
Gotcha. I will just say, sort of, the other thing about Daryl Hannah is it is important that she is the love interest in this movie. And the only reason that you know that she is into him in a sex way is that Antonio says to Christopher Reeve, hey man, she's into you.
You're not going to do the accent?
No, I'm not going to do the
I'm
accent.
going to do the Jamaican
I
accent?
am absolutely not going to do that.
Okay.
He says, she's into you. And Christopher Reeve says, impossible. And he says, nonsense. You're a fine looking man. I'm sure you did well with the ladies, like, prior to your accident. There's no reason that you can't continue to do that. And he's like, ha ha ha. But she has never given any indication in word or deed that was visible to the audience that she was into him. The only way we know is that one character said to another character, hey man, she's into you, which is not good storytelling,
Yeah.
I would argue.
Yeah. And then, because I know there's the scene at the end where she comes up in his elevator and the door opens and she's looking very slinky, and then comes over to him and starts making out with him.
Yes.
And that's when he says, like,
I
don't know if you've noticed.
don't know if
And she's like, we can work
we
around
can work
it.
around it, which is
I'm not trying to get back into that topic, but more, I guess I'm more asking, isn't there another scene earlier where she shows up at his place kind of sexy? And I thought there was. I seem to remember there being another time that she showed up that was giving the audience some indication that she was into him.
I don't recall.
Okay.
So I do want to circle back around to that last scene because I think it is actually notable for several reasons. But do you want to just talk about, like, sort of the suspenseful end and, like, how it all shakes out with the artist and everything?
I guess so. I mean, we already said he comes over. We get this very, very interesting scene. I say interesting. I want to say it's good, but I don't know that it's very good.
It might be kind of good.
It's kind of good, but they create a geography in the apartment where they're kind of going from floor to floor. The artist comes in, cuts the tube of his ventilator,
yeah.
and basically leaves him there, he thinks, to die.
Right.
But he gets into his elevator, everything's voice activated, so he's going up and down in the elevator, and the murderer is going up and down in the stairs trying to catch him in the elevator.
Right.
He also knocked out, like, his actual assistant.
His assistant, yeah.
And they're just going from floor to floor, back and forth. And then finally there's a thing where Antonio shows up and actually has, like, a physical altercation with the guy. And then Robert Forster, who we've never even really spoke of yet, he's the detective friend.
Right.
He shows up and actually arrests the guy.
Yeah. And Antonio, is there and helps everybody. And then we see there's a happy ending.
Yeah.
Everybody's fine.
Right.
Everybody's fine. No one's killed.
But, like, I think the greater point is, it is at times kind of comical to just have so much of the suspense of that final thing be a guy running up and down stairs from floor to floor.
A different guy going up and down in the elevator.
But it actually kind of works.
It kind of works and is almost a little bit of a tribute to, as you pointed out, sort of the physical geography element of suspense in the original movie Rear Window, because everything is very static and still physically very static and still very suspenseful.
Yeah.
And it's cool that Christopher Reeve got to do kind of an action scene. Like, that was pretty neat.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. They didn't, like, have to do that.
Yeah.
He had a lot of agency in that scene to help himself.
Mm-hmm.
He, like, did the voice activated thing where he changed the password right away so the guy couldn't get into even though it was nonsense, so the guy couldn't get into the email directory. He's going up and down in the elevator. Even though his ventilator's been cut, he's doing a good job to sort of breathe on his own, like, until it can be fixed for him, because he can't do that himself.
Which is a throwback to the beginning of the movie where we see him learning to breathe on his own again.
Right.
Which was a real thing too.
Right.
So that actually does come up in the third act.
Right. Oh,
yeah.
I wanted to make one very interesting point. Not just something that occurred to me that I thought was very fascinating. So at the beginning, you see Christopher Reeve in the bed before he's had any of his rehabilitation. He's just actually waking up for the first time after his accident, and he's talking to the doctor, and I think he might even be talking to the cop who was investigating what happened.
Well, it was Robert Forster.
Right, it was
Yeah.
Robert Forster. That's what I'm saying. And I just thought it was interesting that he was able, in the context of the movie, he's able to speak to them. Because I believe in real life he actually had to be taught to speak again, because when you have a permanent ventilator, you have to learn how to speak using that air intake. And is my understand. I remember reading.
I remember that too.
He
yeah.
had to learn to speak very specifically with the air, with the way that his ventilator worked. So I just thought that was really interesting that in reality, that particular element of that scene was like maybe unrealistic, but as you pointed out, like Christopher Reeve would probably have been the first to say, no, I know, like I wasn't really able to speak in that way at that time, but it's a movie.
Exactly. Like, you can really trust that the subject of the movie, that one of the producers is going to say, yes, this is not realistic, but it's okay, everybody.
Right. And that would have this now imaginary conversation again feels much more satisfying knowing that it was Christopher Reeve himself that produced and acted in the movie, and not just like a squad of non-disabled people.
Yeah.
So anyway, they get to the end. It is very interesting that he, having sort of struggled, I think, emotionally with the way that he needs help from people, he is able to save himself, and I think that is his journey, right? In this movie, that he has this agency and is able to be proactive, and there was a genuine threat to his life. This guy thought he had killed him, was trying to kill him, and he was able to sort of overcome that, which is an interesting journey that he's able to take. And then we have this sort of button at the end where Daryl Hannah shows up at the apartment, and he's hanging out and just watching TV. I think he's not watching his neighbors anymore. She starts like, kissing on him and everything. And I don't think she says we'll work around it. Actually.
No, she doesn't. That was me. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
it's very specific what she says. He says, well, I can't, but he says to her at that point, it's not always going to be this way. And she's like, no, it's fine. We'll just have to be creative, which I think is very sweet, and actually I believe I read an interview with Dana and Christopher Reeve where they were years ago, where they were actually very open about like their sex life, and like you have to be creative when you're in that situation, but that the depiction of and we talked about this in a different episode too, is like the depiction of disabled people with a sexuality is very unusual, and I think should be shown more.
Yeah.
Disabled people are often portrayed as being like not having a sexuality, which of course is not true. What were you going to say?
I want to be clear about, because I do think the scene comes off as kind of unintentionally funny.
Yeah.
But I want to be really clear. I don't think the comedy is coming from the nature of his disability.
Yeah.
I think it's coming from the fact that they did not do a good job setting up a romantic relationship between these two characters.
Yes,
that's the comedy.
The comedy is that it's very abrupt.
Yes.
That she just shows up and starts like mooching on him. He's like,
The fact that he's a quadriplegic doesn't even enter into it.
No, and I turned to you and I was like, I want to be very clear. I'm very uncomfortable right now. It is not because he is disabled. It is because sex scenes make me very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, the best thing you can say about it.
That's
is
right.
they managed to make you uncomfortable in the way that every sex scene makes you uncomfortable.
Correct. So anyway, I thought it was real fun, and I thought it was very interesting. I thought the first 20 minutes of it were not Rear Window, even a little, but that's okay.
But they were this movie.
And it struck me that like Christopher Reeve was like, I want to make a movie about my experience. I guess it needs to have a plot. I like Rear Window. Let's put that in. Like, why the heck not?
Yeah.
It's really fun. I would recommend anybody watch it.
Yeah. Can I say two other just quick things about it that I liked? One, I already mentioned Robert Forster. We barely mentioned him. He's in the whole thing. I love Robert Forster. He's just a fun presence to have in a movie. And blows my mind, he was also in the Psycho remake this same year.
There you go.
So he just had a fun 1998 remake in Hitchcock. I like that. And another little thing I'll throw in, I tend to like talking about music in these things. Not for nothing. The music in this is David Shire, who did Taking of Pelham 123. He did Zodiac, which we covered on Multiplex Time Machine. Like, this is a guy who is a good composer, and the music is good in this movie. And not for nothing, I liked that part of it.
Yeah.
Can I tell you a little bit about Disturbia?
Sure.
Disturbia is, we're going to take this entire thing and we're going to make it much more exciting, because now he's not our main character, Shia LaBeouf. He's not physically incapacitated. He's legally incapacitated because he punches his teacher and he gets put under house arrest for the summer. So he's got an ankle monitor on and he can't leave his house. So he's stuck in his house, and that's why he's peeping at all the neighbors. Okay? So that's
Yeah.
one thing right there. It is kind of a fun movie. Shia LaBeouf was a pretty fun screen presence at that time. Turned out to be problematic, but I mean, he's a damaged person, so that's a bummer for everyone involved. I will say this. It has a couple things going for it that I think are really good and a couple things going against it that I think are not very good. One of the things it has going for it is casting, because Shia LaBeouf's really good in it, and the killer who lives behind him is David Morse. You know David Morse, right?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. The one, I mean, the story I always love about David Morse is that when they were making The Green Mile, they had to put Michael Clark Duncan. He played one of the prison guards.
Mhm.
They had to put Michael Clark Duncan in like platform shoes because he needed to look big, but David Morse is actually like 6'10" or something like that, and was making Michael Clark Duncan look tiny. So they had to make him look bigger than David Morse. David Morse is great. He's a hey, it's that guy who I really love.
Sure.
And so he's great in it. Carrie-Anne Moss plays the mom. Like, there's a lot of really good people that are in the movie. But the things it has going against it, one of the things is that, you know, we already talked about how the original Rear Window did such a good job with the geography of the, you know, the apartment building.
Mhm.
They do a pretty terrible job of that in Disturbia. You'd never really know where any of the houses are in relation to each other. His house just seems to have this infinite number of sides to it where he can look out any window and see any house on the street,
Yeah.
any house in the neighborhood, but you never get one shot from like a bird's eye view of like, here's this house in relation to this house. So it's his house, the guy who lives behind him, and then there's the hot girl that just moved in next door who's the love interest. She's next to them, but you never really know what all the relationships are between all of them. So the geography is actually kind of terrible.
Yeah.
The other thing is, this isn't a guy who just killed his wife. Turns out, no, this guy was a serial killer who killed a shitload of people in Texas.
Great.
And now he's killing a shitload of people in this town.
Great.
So the big reveal at the end, it basically turns into a slasher movie.
Yeah.
So he goes to the house, or he goes to the guy's house, and the guy's trying to kill him, and his mom is tied up, and he's finding bodies upon bodies. The walls are full of bodies. There's pits full of bodies. There's so many bodies. And the guy's coming at him, and he kills him with some like shears. It turns from a pretty good suspense movie to like a subpar slasher movie, and it's kind of a bummer.
Gotcha.
So that is not very good. But the thing it has in common with the Christopher Reeve version is that the love interest is also not very good, and pretty much everything with her character is not good.
Yeah.
So that was the quick version of Disturbia. Again, listen to Multiplex Time Machine if you want to hear a
If you want.
longer version of that.
Yes, totally.
Don't hedge on it. It's a good show.
Yeah, you should. I know you should listen to it. I'm just saying, if you don't care about Disturbia, listen to a different episode. That's all.
Oh, yeah. No, you haven't. If you don't listen to it, you haven't been robbed of any content.
Yeah.
You want to do some quadrants really
Yeah,
quickly?
let's do it.
Let's assume that the original short story was not based on the H.G. Wells one.
Great.
So let's treat
That's just a fun
it had
extra.
to be murder as the original.
That's fine.
Do you think the creators of the 1954 movie Rear Window cared about the original source material?
Not really.
No.
No.
I don't think they did.
No.
Was it successful?
Yes.
There we go. 1998. Do you think they cared about the source material?
Oddly, not really.
Yeah? You think
No,
so?
I don't think so. I think they were like, I think Christopher Reeve wanted to make a movie that drew from his personal experience. This is the sense that I got. I could be wrong.
Mhm.
I don't know. And
They found a property.
they sent an assistant to kind of make a list of movies that could be acted by a main character who didn't have to do much physical. And Rear Window came up and they were like, yes, that's a great idea. That's fun.
Mhm.
I don't think, look, here's what I'm saying. I don't think it stemmed from a great desire to remake Rear Window. I think it stemmed from a great desire to make a movie with Christopher Reeve and what can he do? What can he accomplish?
That is probably fair.
Yeah.
Was it successful?
I'm going to, honestly?
Yeah.
I'm going to say yes.
I'm going to say yes, too.
I'm going to say yes. I think it, despite the 1998-ness of it not holding up, I actually think a lot of the plot holds up pretty well.
Mhm.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Do you think the creators of Disturbia cared about the original Cornell Woolrich story? It had to be murder?
My understanding is they're legally obligated to say that no, they were not. They did not care about the source material when they were making their movie.
Or the movie Rear Window, I suppose.
Yep.
No, I think that's right. Was it successful?
I'm going to go ahead and say, yeah, a little. It's kind of fun. It's
all
kind of
right.
fun with its problems. It's kind of fun.
There you go.
Well, this has been Adapter Parish. If you'd like to find us online, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at AdaptCast. You can join our groups on Facebook and Goodreads, and you can also find and follow me on Letterboxd. If you have anything to say that's longer than a tweet, you can always send an email to adapterparishcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, there are 3 great ways you can do it. First, tell a friend. Second, a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice would be greatly appreciated. Third, we are on Patreon. This show will always be free, but if you become a patron, you can get access to Adapter Parish Plus, our bonus show that releases every other week between episodes of this show, and our patron-only Slack community. It's been a lot of fun, and all the details are at patreon.com/adaptcast.
Have you ever pooped in a bucket, Lisa? Have you?
You ever shit in a hole? You ever shit in a hole, Lisa?
Bye, everybody.
No! No, you haven't. And that's why we'll never work.